This video covers the very basics of video editing using Blender. Let's start with an example of a video that we recorded with the audio that we cleaned up and used AutoDuck on in Audacity. First off, here's the original video. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. And then the next will be the audio that we cleaned up and used AutoDuck on. The biggest thing you should notice is that when the voice comes on, the music is reduced in volume. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Go into Blender, and at the top switch our view to the video editing view. We have three main parts to this window. The one that's in black now is where we'll see a preview of what we're editing. At the bottom is the strip editor where we put our audio and video. And the top left is the curves, and we'll look at that a little bit later. And then in the bottom, as most views have, the sequencer. So to bring in our video, we can just drag it on, drop it on top of the strip editor. And you'll notice that we have two strips come in. The one on the bottom, if we right click on it to select it and look at the right side, we can see that it's of type movie. If we right click on the one above it and look at the type, we see that it is of type sound. This is the sound from the original video file, which we don't want to use because remember we cleaned some up and used AutoDuck on it. So we can just right click on it and press delete and erase that strip. Now to bring the audio in is the same thing. We can just drag and drop the audio file above the video strip. The next step is we need to set the frames that it's going to render to the same length as the video. So if we just right click on it, press page up, it will take the cursor to the end of the video strip. And to set the frame range to the same as that, just hover over the sequencer and press E. If we move the cursor back to the beginning, press the play button, we can preview what we got. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Notice that our audio finished way before our video. The first time through, Blender will be adding all the frames to memory, so the next time through they should stay in sync. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. So if all we want to do is add the audio back in, we can go back to our default view and render it. So go default view. Over on the right hand side, let's make sure that the resolution matches. So we recorded a 1920 by 1080 video. We want to turn the rendering percent up to 100%, otherwise it would only render at half the resolution. The other thing we want to make sure that we have the same frame rate as the original video, which was 60 frames per second. And then we want to choose where to save these videos. And we also need to decide what kind of files we want. So the easiest thing, if we're doing a video, is to just pick the AVI JPEG. but I'm going to pick the FFmpeg instead. And then we need to set our encoding. Let's use one of the presets. So let's pick this H.264 in MP4. And then we also need to pick our audio codec. I'm going to pick AAC. And then if we click the animation button, you can see the progress of your rendering up at the top, and it gives you an estimate of how long it's going to take. So we have an estimated time remaining of 59 seconds. And then if we look in our output folder, test 1 2 3, test 1 2 3, test 1 2 3. Now before we go on to anything more in Blender, I want to show you another tool that can be used if all you're doing is adding new audio into a video. It's a command line program called FFmpeg, which you'll have to install separately. So you start the command with FFmpeg and then tell it any input files you're going to use. So -I to indicate an input file. So we're going to use this MKV file as our input for our video. And then by the same name, but MP4 is going to be the input for our audio. Then we need to tell FFmpeg which files are using what streams. So if I use -map, I'll go 0, which represents the first input file, :V. That tells it that we want the video from the first input file, then another map, 1, so 1 being the second input file, and A for audio. So we're taking the video from the first input file and the audio from the second input file. And then I'm going to tell it to use the same video and audio codecs by saying -V codec, copy, -A codec, copy, and then we'll give it an output name. Just call it new audio.mkv. And that's it for that. So test 1 2 3, test 1 2 3, test 1 2 3. So notice that we got the same result using FFmpeg, but much faster. And that's due to the fact that it just took the audio and video streams from the two different files and put them together, where in Blender it's rendering each frame, it's taking the video file and extracting each frame separately. And then the same thing with the audio. It's taking the audio, extracting it to samples, and then re-encoding it, which is very inefficient if all we want to do is put a video and audio together. So let's go back into Blender, go back to the video editing view, and look at why we might stay in here instead. So let's say here we want to keep with this audio but use a different video. So let's right click on the video, delete, go erase strip. Let's go back here and we'll use this one from the example from a while ago. So I want to point out something. If I right click on this video, go to properties, the frame rate is slightly different for this one. It's 59.94 frames per second instead of 60 frames per second. So let's go ahead and drop it in there. But before we forget, let's go back to the default view and change our frame rate to the one from the video that we just dropped in. And then let's go back to the video editing. So notice that now our audio and our video strips are different sizes. So one handy thing that Blender can do for us is it can allow us to visualize our audio. So if you select an audio strip and then in the right click Draw Waveform, well, we can see the areas where it ducks, and then it's the voice, and so on. So this would be useful if we were trying to line up this video and audio. Let's just decide where we want to start and end the audio. So if it's selected, you can just press grab and move your audio strips around. So let's say we want more audio on the tail end, or sorry, more music without voice on the tail end. So we want to cut the ends off of this audio. There's a few things we can do. There's two handles on each end. You can just select it and grab and then drag it to match up with the others, or you can use K to cut them and then delete the unused part. So any cut that you make, it leaves the handle intact and you can drag it in or out to the original stuff. So when you use the K key, you don't lose any data. So now that we've cut those down, hover over the sequencer and reset the frame range. So let's just play through again. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. So now that we've cut it down, we could go back to default again, click animation again, and wait for it one more time. And here's the result of that one. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. So let's go back to video editing and look at a few more things. So you can add multiple sources on top of each other, which could be video, but I'm just going to use an image for the example here. So I have this smile image that, if I look at the properties, has a height and width of 800 pixels. And I'm just going to drop this in here. Move it to a random spot and make it a little bigger. And since how it's on top, when we scroll through, you can see any spot where the image is, it covers up the video. By default, it stretches the image and centers it. If we want to decide how big we want to make it, we can click this image offset. So I suggest making images the size you want them to be before you insert them. And then under that image offset, you have an X and Y offset. So if I wanted to center this, in the X direction, we're 1920 wide, divide by 2, and then subtract half of the width of our image, so minus 400. So if I offset in 560, puts it in the center. And we can do the same thing for the height. So if I offset in Y by 140, we're now in the middle of the screen. So notice that this image, we can see a checker pattern in the background. That means that most of our image is transparent. And with something like this, we probably want it to show over top of the video, but not completely block out the video. So if we go on the strip editor on the right side and change our blend type to alpha over, it goes over the video but only covers where it's not transparent. So any object that's on the screen we can animate. Any parameter on any of the strips can be animated. So let's say we want to move the image across the screen. Remember we set this X offset. So let's say we want to enter from the left at the first frame it's visible. So remember, if we set the offset to 0, it goes right to the edge. If we set our X offset to -400, if we set it to -800 or the width of our image, it's off screen to the left now. So now anything we want to animate, if you right click on it and go insert keyframe, what that means is it's going to set the value at that frame to the value that you set. And then if we go to the end of our strip, and set the offset to the width of the screen, and then insert another keyframe, it's going to fill in all the values in between there. So if I go back across, notice that X offset is changing as the frames go by. So now let's go back to the beginning and play through it. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Another useful item to maybe animate might be the opacity, if you want to fade things in and out. So if you can see if you lower the opacity, it gets darker and more. So let's say we want to start out being completely transparent. So if we set our opacity to 0, insert a keyframe, and then somewhere about the middle of where it should be showing, set the opacity to 1, meaning it shows 100%. Insert another keyframe. And we can see we don't see anything for a little bit, and we can see it fading in. And then just goes out. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. If we look at an audio strip, it has a volume control. So let's say we want to fade in and out. So let's move our cursor to the first frame, set the volume to 0, insert a keyframe, pick a point where we want the volume to come back up to 100%. Let's make it fairly short on the incoming. Set the volume to 1. Insert another keyframe. And add 2 more keyframes at the end. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Let's render that out and see our result. Default view. Click animation and let it go. And then let's check our result. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. So those are the very basics of video editing with Blender, and that's as far as we'll get into it at this time.